Well, good afternoon. Thank you for everyone that has chosen to come here. We're going to go ahead and get started. I need to start on time because I have to get to a board meeting event at 6 o'clock. And for those who don't know me, I just introduced myself. I'm Superintendent Michael Baumann. And again, thank you for coming. I do want to start by saying that your students are the heart of our district, and that is not lost on any of us who work tirelessly to try to do the right things for our community in this district. We want to help them succeed academically, socially, civically, and personally as they come through our system and move on to their next stages of life. And it's the entire reason that we're here. Now, I'm charged with helping each student succeed through a strategic lens. I have to look at the whole district and the whole community. That's what I'm responsible for, which means it's important to ensure that our system is set up adequately to support students and staff. The reality of Lakeville today, I've lived in Lakeville since 2005. I've been in the district since 2013. And our reality is that we're a growing district. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge for us to be able to deal with new housing as it's being built, and it's being built at a rapid pace. I think as the economy adjusts, that pace also adjusts. The school district has no role in determining how much or how fast new housing is going to be built in our city. But we have to respond to that. And this district is responsible for responding as best that we can with the resources that we have and to deal with enrollment increases that occur because of this growth. Which is why we are recommending changes to our elementary and middle school attendance areas for the next year. And I recognize that there's a feeling many of you have that it's not fair, and that your children have to move, and you're right. It is not fair. That said, I have to deal with the realities of what we're faced with, and I'm going to walk through some more details about that so that I can maybe connect the dots in the story of how things have progressed to where we are now. I recognize that there's a feeling many of you have beyond that it's not fair, but it's not equitable either, and we're trying to get to the right situation in our district so that we can get a little more stable as a community. I know that I'm accountable to you and that I'm accountable to the students for the outcomes of this process. And it's my goal to be fully transparent with you, and over the course of the next hour, we want to answer as many of the questions that were submitted to us via the RSVP form and get to as many of those as possible so that you can leave tonight with a little bit more clarity. So one of the biggest questions you have is, how did we get here? How is it that we keep doing this boundary adjustment scenario? And the adjustments are here today, and we want to discuss this, and it's part of a continuing process. I departed the district in 2022 and retired, and then the following year we were getting in a stance to open Highview Elementary School, and whenever you open a new school, you're going to have to do boundary adjustments. And I think that was the start point for much of this challenge that we're faced with. During the 23-24 school year, the district utilized a consulting company named TeamWorks to guide the district through what the process was going to be, and it included data review and feedback, collection from internal leadership, and a working group of community representatives. And they also collected information via surveys from the entire community. We have all that information. We archived that. When I returned to the district, I reviewed that very carefully. Ultimately, that process narrowed down to two potential solutions. The The school board chose the model that was not recommended by administration, and that was a very difficult situation to walk into. And that put Highview in a situation where it opened at a greater occupancy than I think made sense for us long term. And at that time, it was known that the additional changes to attendance areas would be needed shortly thereafter. Following that decision, growth in the area of the community serving Highview Elementary and Century Middle School occurred rapidly. So during the 24-25 school year, and that is the year that I returned to the district, principals and district leaders met to review the updated data and determine possible solutions. An initial proposal was brought to the school board on March of 25, and that was to make smaller changes just to the areas surrounding Century and Highview. Ultimately, in June, after several iterations of refinement, an option was approved by the school board that only made changes in the Century and Highview attendance areas where houses were not yet occupied or construction wasn't completed. Administration was charged by the school board at that time to develop a solution that would be stabilizing for the district and capable of assimilating the anticipated growth as we move forward. So that leads us to this year, where we are at, in which we have Century that's over capacity, and we have Highview that is beyond 100% capacity. And I think some of you may be aware that we've had to convert some spaces that weren't intended for classrooms into classroom space. And that's not a sustainable situation for us. All of our assessments with regard to filling a building, 85% of building fill is about the tolerance you can have in order to function as buildings are designed. And again, principals and district leaders were convened to review the updated data. We looked at the historical data and future projections, and ultimately have to make a recommendation to support the needs of our students and staff across the system. Now, I want to be clear that although all historical data and feedback was reviewed, the district isn't working with a vendor or a third-party consultant or any external consulting firms on this process. So I am the sole person who's responsible for what the staff team has put together. And I didn't spend $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 to figure it out. I took all the data that we already had. I looked at the situation, worked with my staff team. We did the analysis of projections on numbers. We triangulated that using a demographer, our internal person who does enrollment counts and does that very accurately, and a third party who also does school finance demography. And we triangulated that to come up with our current projections. So having three sources, I think, gives us the best validation of what our projections are for our community. The planning criteria and objectives were reviewed by the school board this past November, and an initial proposal was brought to the school board in December, and we've requested that the school board make a final determination at their meeting on January 13th so that the district can plan staffing requirements. Everything that occurs in a school district, if it's finance or staffing, is predicated on enrollment. So where are the kids in our buildings? At what grade level are they, so that we can make sure that we have the teachers necessary to deliver our teaching and learning models to our students. Our goal is to work this process so that current teachers know where they will be and where they will be teaching next year. And we do that at the end of February, early March, to optimize selection opportunities and allow us to retain and attract a high quality staff, which we think is very important for our students and for our community. The data we used is based on current enrollment numbers, which are the only hard numbers, and projections are based on assessments from internal staff and, as I said, 2 external demographers. We feel these provide us with a solid picture of what we look like now and what we look like over the next 36 to 60 months. And I'm aware that there were several surveys sent to families in 23-24 school year about boundary adjustments process, including seeking the community's preference between the final 2 options. While we're not sending district-wide surveys in this round, I hope you will see in the adjustments that have been made to our maps that we are reviewing your feedback and have been able to make some changes to reduce impact. Ultimately, this decision has to be made based on balancing our enrollment and accomplishing our strategic objective, which is to balance out our elementary schools, not have over-concentration in any one, and be able to assimilate the growth we're going to have in our middle schools. So I'm going to hand off an opportunity here for our Executive Director of Operations, Lucas Yoho, to walk through what the updated recommendations are, and I'll come back here shortly. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lucas Yoho. I'm the Executive Director of Operations for the school district, primarily responsible for leading this effort under the direction of the superintendent. We're going to go over some of the proposed adjustments here, and if you've been monitoring this closely, you know that this has changed slightly from our first iteration. And really we did that based on the feedback from the community, as well as some direction from the school board to go back and look at a few things. So if you look here to the left, there's the map that lays out where the attendance areas are proposed for the elementary school level. And if you look down here to the bottom right, you'll see at the left-hand side, that would be the attendance or enrollment, if you will, occupancy of each of our schools if the attendance areas remain unchanged. And I would just kind of highlight, Highview Elementary, for example, would go up to over 107%. So really that's the strongest indicator based on our projected enrollment that we definitely need to make a change in our attendance areas. So we went through that process as the superintendent has laid out. And if you look over here to the right, you'll see that we've balanced each of the schools based on whether it's a high growth area. For example, Highview would be considered a high growth area. If you go out and walk outside the front of Highview, you can see houses being built right around Highview Elementary. So that is a high growth area. So we've brought that down considerably to ensure that we have enough room for that growth. And then we also have some other high growth areas, Lake Marion Elementary, for example, and then Cherry View Elementary. All the schools there in the northeast are considered in a high growth area. And then we've moved those students to our more low growth areas, kind of the central part of the school district to ensure that we have room in our high growth areas. So what we did here also is, go to the next slide. Oh no, back one please. Okay, so what we did here is, based on the second iteration, we were able to reduce the number of total movers from 605 down to 568, and then the number of multiple movers from 228 down to 160. And so that was a good refinement that we were able to accomplish. And then looking at that total aggregate, it's 11% at the elementary level of total students, and then 5% for the total district. So not a large amount, but still an amount to be moved multiple times. And then all the demographics that were required by statute are within the prescribed tolerances here in the current proposal. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so here's the middle schools. Middle schools, even with these adjustments, our middle school students are still beyond that ideal occupancy of 85%. So again, if you look to the left-hand side here, if nothing is changed, you'll have Century Middle School at 103%, almost 103%, and then Kenwood Trail at 85%, and then McGuire at 80%. So definitely have a capacity problem that we're going to address through some proposed middle school expansions. But then, of course, we do have a slight concentration problem, and we do want to provide some relief to that school, specifically Century Middle School. And so you see the proposed attendance area there to the left in terms of the map. So it's really bringing a lot of the western side of the district into McGuire Middle School, and then a little bit of chunk of the northeast portion of the district from Century to Kenwood Trail, just really to provide some relief to the middle schools here. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the last slide was what we call Mike 1, Middle School 1 proposal. So that's what we're requesting that the board approve on the 13th of January. But in anticipation of expanding our capacity at each of our middle schools and really try to balance out the enrollment at each of our schools, we're proposing in the future what we call Mike 2 here, and continuing to expand McGuire Middle School's attendance area up and more aligned with Lakeville South High School. So that will remain some alignment there. Again, this is just proposed at this point, but really we built Mike 1 based on Mike 2 just to make sure that we're not creating multiple movers in the future. And you can see there, once we build that capacity, it's going to drop CMS's occupancy down to 68%, which is great. And then McGuire Middle School will be at 72. And then with Kenwood Trail being a very low growth area, we'll try to keep that between 80 and 85% based on projected enrollment. Okay. All right, so there are a lot of questions regarding what path the students would follow, either to North or South high schools. And we hear your desire to ensure students have peers who will transition with them to the middle and high schools. As you can see here, with the growth in our district and the geographic location of our schools, it's really not possible to make every elementary transition entirely into the same middle school. However, students will have several of their classmates continuing along with them to the next school. So you can see those splits from the elementary to middle on the left, and then you can see those splits from middle to high school on the right, and that really remains fairly unchanged, with CMS going 100% to the Lakeville North and McGuire going to Lakeville South, and then Kenwood Trail remaining split. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is kind of go through kind of the decision-making considerations that we've had, during this whole process. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so you see here is where our current elementary schools capacity, enrollment is at each of our schools. Again, Highview being at 106%, and then we have some schools that are down at like 60%. So Christine Huddleston, for example, at 59.3%, and Eastview at 62.6%. So it's really a concentration problem in the northeast of our school district. And also noting that we don't have a capacity problem because across the district we're only at 76.6% full. So really we just need to rebalance our elementary school enrollments across the district, and our proposal has done that. Let's go to the next slide. So here with the middle schools, you really have two problems. You have a capacity problem, so we have too many middle school students and not enough seats. We also have slightly a concentration problem with Century Middle School there in the northeast, and so we're tackling that really through two ways. One, expanding our middle schools. The board's approved us to go to a bond referendum for that in May, so we're going to do that. That should give us increased capacity and solve our capacity problem. And then with some small modifications to the attendance areas, we are, ensuring that our schools are balanced across the district. Okay, and really this slide here just kind of lays out and really explains or demonstrates where our growth areas are in the district. So that's a picture of our district there, and you can kind of see some of the schools. And if you look at where all those boxes are, really northeast and southwest is where we're going to see our future growth in terms of new housing developments. And so that's kind of where we focused our high growth schools, is in the northeast and to a lesser extent in the southwest. We've worked very closely with both the Lakeville city planners and the Elko New Market city planners to kind of get this data, and we review that periodically with them to make sure that we can see future developments that are coming online. Okay, so how do we decide what right looks like? In order to accommodate that future growth without having to make significant changes, we align those areas to low growth and growth areas. Okay, so once a school gets to 85% capacity, that's when it becomes full. All right, and so what we try to do is maintain our schools at 80 to 85%. That keeps them adequately staffed and full, but not too full to where our students and our principals feel overwhelmed and we can't achieve our learning outcomes. Let's go next slide. Okay, so here's the objectives and criteria that we use to determine our proposed attendance areas. Okay, we wanted to ensure that we have long-term growth, and so that kind of goes back to where I explained about high growth and low growth areas. We want to make sure that we're maintaining a diverse and balanced student body. So by statute, we have some requirements there to make sure that we are socially, racially, balanced, and we're making sure that we have a good cross-section of both general education and special education. And then we want to make sure, lastly, that our students and our staff can maintain those daily desired experiences. Okay, and then of course there's some challenges to that, is really how do we maintain that long-term growth, and that's by balancing our attendance areas to make sure that they are properly sized and so that we have room for growth. The other challenges we have is just a diverse student body. We have students across our school district, and we need to make sure that they are balanced, and sometimes they are concentrated in certain areas, so that really affects the way that our attendance areas are shaped. And then again, making sure that our schools are in the right spot, and that we have, all the right tools, necessary to ensure that those daily experiences can be met, through properly sized facilities and attendance areas. Okay, so here's a good example of, one of the issues that we see is, we get a lot of complaints about, well, I can see my school from my house, but I'm going to a different school. So, most of our schools, especially at the elementary level, are very close together. As you can see there to the left in the north, you have a lot of the schools are really within 1 mile or less of each other. And then in the south, again, they're really, within 1.5 miles of each other. So that makes it really difficult to have our attendance area centered around each of our schools. And then it makes it really difficult, in terms of where do we draw those boundaries to make sure that we have some semblance of neighborhood schools, and you're not, you don't live next to a school and not go to the school. So that's kind of just demonstrates, if you kind of take a district-wide picture or look at this, that, kind of presents some of the problems that we have in our school district. We want to get this right, so in order to achieve that, accommodate that future growth without having to make significant changes, we need to make sure they're geographically aligned. The areas of low growth and growth. This is why you see some neighborhoods moving into schools, why others are moving out of those schools. We believe this is the best way to accommodate that future growth. We have received several concerns that we seem to be prioritizing future students over current. We're trying to do right by all of our students and set the district system up for future success and long-term stability. It would not be appropriate to not try to provide the best possible teaching and learning environment for our students. The only way to remedy the current situation we are in is to move current students. We would not recommend that if we didn't have to, but is absolutely necessary. All right, we cannot fully eliminate multiple movers either and achieve our strategic objective to balance current enrollment and prepare for future growth. However, we have refined a proposal to reduce the number of multiple movers by 30% at the elementary level. Additionally, there are many very large subdivisions. Individual perceptions of a neighborhood tend to be based on their personal experience of who their kids play with, whether it's across the street, across the backyard, or down the road. We have worked to keep subdivisions together whenever possible. We use a Dakota County GIS mapping to ensure that we are moving subdivisions together to the greatest extent possible. Safety and transportation were considered in our process, and we do consult with our transportation partner about the feasibility of our bus routes, and there were no concerns about increasing costs or being able to safely transport our students to school based on these new proposals. There are currently priority guidelines for interdistrict transfers. These are currently available on the website, and information about how to interdistrict transfer will be provided once a decision is made about the attendance areas. And there's those there. Okay, and in terms of our special education population, we are monitoring that closely with our special education team. All right. Okay, and so what we're going to do with intra-district transfers is if you are a multiple mover, you are going to be allowed to submit an intra-district transfer and apply for that, and then based on the thresholds and capacity of each of our elementary or each of our schools, we'll go ahead and assign, based on the current process that we use, we will add additional students where we can and when we can. All right, we have not determined where exactly to put that prioritization in terms of the district prioritization list. Once the board approves the school attendance areas, we will go through a planning process to kind of integrate that in, and then we will publish that for your use as well. Okay, so special education. So bottom line, we're monitoring our special education population closely. Our resource model will continue. They will be subject to move, but if you have a center-based student and a center-based support, then they will remain there just like we do now. And if you are concerned, special education will offer affected families an IEP meeting so we can ensure a smooth transition and then answer any questions for you with that. Okay, at this time, I'll go ahead and I will turn this back over to Michael.
Just so everybody knows too, we will provide these charts for you. Email, is that correct? Because I know people want to maybe study them a little bit closer. And I'll just go back to sharing. I do understand that this is hard, and I do care about our students, and I do want them to do well. Our students are who we are as a system. Our teachers are who we are as a system. And we're going to do everything we can to help with transitions. A comprehensive plan is in development. I'm working with our principals to make sure that we have the right open house events, that opportunities for school tours are provided. Principals are going to work to review student classroom placements. There are counselors at all our schools who will be engaged to support students. There will be overall support for transitioning students as well as opportunities for individualized support for students who may have additional needs. Resources for parents to support your children through these big transitions. Again, our mission is academic, social, civic, and personal readiness. The social and personal support is a critical component of what we do, and we have not forgotten that in our process. We will do everything that we can to help our students be resilient and successful. And I am sure that we will be challenged on that matter, and I'm trying to stand up for that challenge so that we are ready. I do wish I could tell you there's something different that can be done. There are refinements, and we are open to that. What I can say is that I assess that the plan we have presented here and will present to the school board does meet our strategic objective to balance enrollment among our schools and prepare us to accommodate growth without significant changes each and every year going forward. We have to stabilize our system. We have to stabilize our system from the opening of Highview Elementary. That has not been accomplished. Our enrollment is growing, and that's being driven by decisions that are outside of the school district's control, but we have to respond to those, and we're partnering with our cities and trying to understand and see the picture on an ongoing basis. When it comes to additional school space that we do need more middle school space. The projections do not show a need for a fourth middle school. Several years back, it was trending that way. Then I think the economy slowed and our projections had to be adjusted, and they don't indicate that we need a fourth middle school. Projections for the elementary level indicate that we have enough space among our elementary schools, and that once attendance areas are addressed, the imbalances occurring because of the concentration issue that we have, we will have the space that we need for the foreseeable future. And we can anticipate that down the road additional space may be needed at the high school level. And at this time, we do not see a need to do or to change our attendance areas for our high schools. We think that's fairly balanced. When you have two schools, it's not so complicated. But we will continue to review attendance areas on an annual basis. This gets to the question of stability. While there is some level of uncertainty that comes with territory of being a growing district, our goal is to provide your students the stability that they deserve. We haven't done that over the last 3 years. As I think everybody here is aware and frustrated with. Stability is what we believe this plan can accomplish. This should provide us with our community with plenty of notice to be aware of changes that may be needed down the road and proactively plan to address those changes with the least impact to our students as possible. If you could, I'd like you to go back to the chart that shows our proposed elementary percentages. So this is essentially the key element of our problem. On the left is what we look like right now. And when you have 107% in one school and 59% in another, and you go across and see that the balancing there is not correct, on the right is where we will land. And if we use the 85% goal, we're going to have all of our schools below that, which is intended to create that stability because we will continue to grow. We know this from conversations with both city planners in Elko New Market and in Lakeville. We have to create that condition in our system. If we do not create that condition in our system, we'll be playing that game on the right every single year. And it's not good for our community. And I say that as a member of our community. So I hope you can see that. That's my case. That's my concern. What I walked into is on the left. This is where we need to go, and so that we can stop doing that, which is, I think, the most important thing that people tell me, we got to quit doing this. Yes, we need to quit doing this. So anyway, I do want to say thank you for coming. I do want to also tell you that you'll get these charts. If you don't get the charts directly, get a hold of the communications department, but we will get these out to everybody so that you have you have the charts and can study them further. Again, I thank you for your kind attention and ask you to support what you can, and if you have concerns, please continue to send them. I know the school board gets them, I get them, and we're trying to look at each and every one of them. So thank you very much.